So hello again and welcome to another gear video. Today I'm going to discuss a little device that you might not have heard of. I'm quite keen on scouring Kickstarter, Indiegogo, those sorts of places for interesting input devices. I've acquired a few over the years, some of which I've used a lot, some of which I've hardly used at all of which have been interesting to me, just in different ways of approaching music. To be quite honest, I found the most useful input device for a synthesizer to be the piano keyboard. Particularly now I've been taking lots of piano lessons and getting reasonably good at it. And particularly the polyphonic aftertouch keyboard on the Hydrasynth is particularly pleasing to me. But I'm always on the lookout for interesting other devices that give me a different approach to music. And I think what I found today is, what I'm going to show you today, is definitely one of those. So it's called a Noodler, spelt NDLR. Don't ask me why. Marketing. And it's what it is. It's sort of it's a 4-channel arpeggiator sequencer, and but it's a lot more than that. Those 4 channels have very defined roles. So you have a pad, a drone, and 2 motifs, and they're quite fixed in what they do. There's not a lot of leeway. You can't you can't turn the drone into a fancy sequencer, or obviously I'll go into that a bit later. So it feels very limiting, but on the other hand that's quite freeing in a way, because it does get on with what it does. And in my case, when I like to play over the top of a backing track like this, I find it quite freeing. You just set this down and then I'll go and improvise a lead line on top of it with either the synthesizer lead synth or with the violin. And if you're into purely sequence music, you could get a whole track out of it very easily, actually really easily. So, and as I said, you can get some, if you work around those, you can get some interesting ideas. So, quick overview of the different types. So I've got a drone here. That drone produces single notes in fairly basic sorts of patterns. So the patterns are defined on the screen here, and you can change those with the encoder. Okay, I won't go into what those mean. It's actually not that important, to be fair. It's a thing you play with rather than examine in a lot of detail, I think. You've got pads. And pads are what they say they are. They are chords of a defined amount of notes. So you have a 3-note pad, up to a 10-note pad. I think it goes quite high. So plug it into a polyphonic sequencer, please. And you can define the range of the pad. You can see the thing expanding and contracting here, and whereabouts it sits in the scale, and all sorts of other things. There are patterns in the pad as well, which you can play with. And then you've got 2 motifs, which are basically arpeggiators. They're quite fancy arpeggiators. They're more like the Micro Monster arpeggiators that I discussed. They're really programmable. You can define your own sequences in them, and you can play around with those while it's on the move. But you're actually encouraged to play with how those sequences work while they're playing. So you've got 2 of those, and they're controlled with these encoders here, and you can define whereabouts they sit, how wide they go, number of notes, the division, and all sorts of things, usual things you expect in an arpeggiator. So yeah, very fancy things, not really the sort of arpeggiator you get on your bog standard analog synth, more like the Micro Monster. Each section on the pad, the drone, and the 2 motifs, they go to often different synths, or to different channels on a multi-timbral synth. I'm using the montage here because it's just easier to show you what's going on. There are 2 MIDI 5-pin DIN MIDI outs at the back here, and there's a 4-port USB connector here. USB also providing power, so that's literally all I'm connected up at the moment with. You can send them to different channels on each port, so you could use channel 1 and channel 2 on port A, and 3 and 4 on port B, or 1 and 2 on port B, or all 4 on port A. You can send them to hardware synths, software synths, That's digital synths, analog synths, whatever you like. And there's also an input here, which I'll show you about later, which you can use for controlling more of what it does note-wise. For this video, I'm sending it all to the montage. That makes it nice and easy for me. It's a fully multi-timbre synth. I've got 4 parts set up on there, as you can see. And I'm going to play around with those a bit, and you can see the levels going out there. I'm using the USB again through a computer. You don't have to use a computer. You can, as I said, you can use the 5-pin DIN there and just power it via USB. Or you can do what I will probably do normally, is run this through my little Raspberry Pi, which does all my MIDI routing for me. So lots of possibilities here. There's clock ins and clocks out. Yeah, nice and very flexible. The Noodle is a chord-based device. So these are your degrees of the chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then inside the ring here, you've got different types of chord which are accessed via the shift key. So if I push 1 here and play the pad, that gives me a basic triad of E Locrian. Gives me the third of the chord, fifth of the chord. You can see that it tells you what they are, so the fifth is obviously B flat in this sense. If I want to do a sus4 chord, you do shift and that, and press 6. This is the C sus4 chord. So everything you do stays consonant with the key and the mode you're in. So if you're interested in doing massively dissonant, messy, noisy stuff, this isn't for you. It's purely for doing it's a chordal thing. It's very difficult to break out of that, and generally, if you want to do that, there are other things that will do it better for you. So everything runs consonant to that. And as you can hear there, if you can hear it over the drilling or grinding in the background, sorry about that, everything's also nicely on the beat. So you can be whole bars, just a single beat or fractions of a beat. It's quite good. There's these to specify the volumes of the various things, pad level, motif 1 level there, as you clock out. There's your quantization there, which you currently set to a quarter note, or a crotchet as we call them in England. You can specify whether the chords get inverted or not. And you've got a mod matrix of all sorts of fancy things. Now then, so if you think that sounds fairly boring, there is a mod matrix and there are LFOs. And these are really flexible. You can specify, so the mod matrix have their own little LFOs in here as well as the actual LFOs you can play with, and they can control, so you can see the mod amount here, and it tells you in great detail what's gone. So motif 1 variant, pattern, clock division, accents, but accents in there, pattern length, you can modulate the position in the sequence, all these sorts of things. So you can modulate all. Don't forget, these are MIDI modulations. They're not timbral modulations, they're sequence modulations. So that just keeps your sequences moving. So if you want to set this thing free running, just play something else while it's tagging along with itself, you can have all these parameters modulating and let these sequences gradually develop and ebb and flow, because they don't have to be, they're synchronized within bars and beats, but they're not synchronized with each other, so they can interleave. It's all very flexible. And then when you can actually turn off the modulations if you want them to be played. The shift and the button there will turn them. There's a red ring around there. You see the red ring on the motif. 1 there is on until these things are all static. And then you can can see it modulating there in the display. So very flexible. So there are a few other things you can. This is the pattern editor, so you can got a choice of 40 different patterns here, and you can edit the pattern using the encoders here. So you're not stuck with the patterns it comes with. Invent your own. There's a rhythm editor on motif. The motifs, so they don't have. I haven't really gone into these yet. They look really interesting. Those are fascinating things. See where the rhythms go and all sorts. And there are several encoders here that are not used. I'm very excited to see what turns up in those. I don't know how good these people are for firmware updates. This hasn't seen an update since the beginning of the year, but it already does pretty much a lot of what you want. So I mean, if there are updates, they're a bonus basically. You can control it externally using MIDI CCs as well. In the manual, it lists all the things you can do with different CC numbers. So as well as all the notes, you can have CCs coming in from other places. It'll respond to the pitch shift and the mod wheel on here. They can do strange things in here. So you can. The possibilities are huge with all sorts of different controllers as well. Adding sort of a cascade of controllers, a controller controlling your synth. It's, yeah, very exciting times, I think. Lots of interesting things. Now, okay, yeah, you've got chords here and stuff. You don't want to do just one chord at a time. You want it to move a sequence of chords. So there is a song builder, which is basically a chord sequencer, which allows you to specify which chords to play when and for how long. So you've got, it's hard to see on the screen, probably looks a bit small on this, but suffice to say you can build up quite complicated sets of chords. These are your sections here. And you've got A, B and C sections, which you can build. So you say for 11 notes, play me an A major triad. It is a bit fiddly this. For 4 notes, play me an E mixolydian. And you can gradually build these up. So you can build quite complicated songs from this. Those are your sections. Now down here is where you actually glue the sections together. And you can say, well, I've got to do A 3 times, if I have one criticism of this, it is very fiddly to use. So you can set up there. The green ones have got things in. You can see the blue ones I haven't done yet. But you can see there the song there. Three runs of that A sequence in A, 1 of C, 3 of B, 1 of A, B, 6 of A. And you can build up quite a complex song there. You've got 8 slots. It is pretty fiddly. I've not really got the hang of this thing yet. This bit yet. It is quite fiddly. But once you've got it done, it does work, and you can set up some really nice things. One of the things you can do if you want to play it more live, you can get a MIDI keyboard, set it running, and you can transpose things by pressing the keyboard. Now, as you can see there, it is slightly confusing in that the notes you play on here correspond to the degrees of the scale from, as if the scale started at C. So you can see there, we're playing an E, so every time I press a C, it plays an E, because E is the root of my chord, the root of my scale. So when I play a C, it plays an F, and you can see them going up here. So it's slightly confusing. You get used to it. That's just the root of my chord, and just pretend everything's in C major even when it's not. So the white notes give you the degrees of the scale, and the black notes give you what type of chord you're playing. Yeah, it's slightly mind bending if you don't think about it enough or too much or both. But for me, then, that's quite exciting, because if I'm playing, say, violin, and I haven't tried this yet, I could put that on a soft step pedal, or even a 12-step pedal, which is laid out like a keyboard, and then I can modulate with my feet while still playing the violin. So I think I'm quite excited about that for sort of live performance, if we ever get live performances on this planet again. Before I get a bit further, have a quick look at the box. It's a nice, solid metal box. Nice clicky buttons. Well, the encoders feel really solid. Display is really clear. I hope it's coming through on the camera. I'm using a GoPro on there because there's not much space in my studio. But this display is really crisp. The things that are big. We need to know what chords you're playing. And the diagrams in the middle are small, but that's fine, because you're not really looking at the detail. You're just looking at the general shape of things. And it is very bright. Compared to some displays I've had that are even slightly bigger, it's much clearer. It's a nice display. You know when you've moved an encoder that they're all they're indents on the encoders. They're not free, they're not smooth. So you can feel when things are changing. It feels nice to use. It's a good box, and it's not that heavy, even though it's a metal box. It's aluminium or something. I don't know. I'm not a metallurgist. So it's light, but still quite very sturdy. And it feels like it can go in a bag quite happily. So put them in the drones, and you can play with these. So you can start and stop all the parts individually and play with them while you're doing it. It's all very nice and interactive, and if you're into that sort of sit-down playing, it's great fun. But then I got started thinking, well, what else can I do with this thing? And I thought, well, the montage is there. It's got all sorts of arpeggiators. It's got drum things in it, all sorts of voicing things. So what can we do? So that's basically a normal drone pad and 2 motifs. So then I thought, maybe I'll put a drum beat on the drone. So it's not doing a drone, it's actually starting a drum beat. And that's where things started to get interesting. So my drone now, instead of being a drone, is that. I've added a slicer to the pad, which is a normal technique. So that gives you quite a different feel, I think. And you can play with the drone there, it changes the drum beat. And it goes, you can program these in the sequencer. Funny. So once I got that working, I think, whoa, what else can I do? So I thought, well, I could put the drums on a motif. How would that work? So now my drums are on motif 1. And it's a full kit on there, so it's not just a single thing, as you can hear. And now as I change the chord, the drums also change, because they're changing the notes in the sample library. It's a bit random there, and you with a bit more thought, I think you could probably do better than that, to be honest. Probably best turn the modulators off actually for a drum beat, that's a good point. Make it a bit more regular. So yeah, just really interesting things with that. The other thing I did was put an arpeggiator on the montage on the pad. So that gives you 3-part counterpoint. So your pad now does that instead of playing a chord. So I put a bass on motif 1. Turn it up a bit. And the drum beat is on the drum. Hours of fun. So I think it gives you an idea of sort of the power of this device when you team it up with a modern digital synth or even an analog synth with sort of digital control. And of course you can plug this into several synths. So I could plug the bass line running into the Moog maybe, and something else into the Hydra synth. You can spread this around your whole studio very easily, either routing it through a laptop or through MIDI cables, however you want to do it. It's wonderfully, massively flexible device. I'm really impressed with it, things you can do with it. So in all, that's the Noodler. It's available on Indiegogo, even though it's been out for about two years now, maybe. It's still available on Indiegogo, not as a Kickstarter type thing, but as a they allow you to buy stuff on there now. So it's $349. Which it's not bad really, considering it's a sort of a small custom device. You know, they're not making a lot of units, and as you can see, the things you can get out of it, I've just basically scratched the surface with this. It comes to about £267 according to the lead times are quite high, or they were when I ordered mine, but they might have calmed down now. The Chinese factories and things are getting back to work again. I think it's a really powerful device. I'm very pleased with it. It feels nice to use. It can do all sorts of interesting things. It keeps you chordal, which might be a good thing, might be a bad thing, depends on the sort of music you make. As I'm more going towards that way, and you can change the modes and stuff. You can even sequence the modes, but it's not as tidy as it might be. I think they're going to hope for a firmware update that'll tidy that up. Yeah, it's a great fun device, and if you're looking for an interesting way of having a new approach to the way you make music, I think it's worth trying. So thanks for watching. That's a Noodler. See you next time.